I never really understood it. Why is it that when I walk into a room, people just stare? Why do I feel eyes following me, even when I haven't said a word? I used to think I was imagining it, that maybe I had something on my face, or I was dressed strangely, or I was just too quiet. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about any of that. And then there's the way some people treat me. Cold, distant, sometimes even outright rude. And the strangest part? I hadn't done anything to them. I hadn't hurt them, insulted them, ignored them, nothing. I used to ask myself over and over again, why don't they like me? Why do they act so strange around me? It hurt. It made me question myself. I wondered if I was too much, too intense, too different, too quiet, too honest, too something. But the more I paid attention, the more I noticed a pattern. Some people were drawn to me, magnetically, like they couldn't help themselves. They'd ask me deep questions, share their secrets, tell me things they didn't even tell their closest friends. Others, though, would pull away, avoiding eye contact, whispering behind my back, or simply acting nervous around me. I couldn't understand it. I didn't feel special. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just being me. And yet, something about me unsettled them. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because my presence seemed to reflect something back at them. Something they weren't ready to face. Something they couldn't name. And that's when the question hit me. Is there something inside me that they can see, before I even see it myself? Is it possible that I'm different, not because I want to be, but because I was meant to be? Back then, I didn't have the words for it. But now I do. Now, I understand. I'm a chosen one. And people can feel it, even when I don't say a word. Welcome to the Eye of Wisdom, a sanctuary for souls seeking deeper truth, healing, and transformation. If you believe there's more to life than what meets the eye, you're in the right place. Through storytelling, spiritual insight, and cosmic wisdom, we explore the journey of awakening together. If our content resonates with your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with those who may need it. Every click helps us grow this conscious community and reach more awakened minds. Thank you for being here. Your presence is part of this sacred unfolding. Let's rise together. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some big moment where I suddenly realized who I was. It came in small waves. Quiet realizations. Silent moments where the truth started to whisper to me, through feelings, through people's reactions, through things I couldn't explain. I started noticing that it wasn't just the way I talked, or the way I carried myself. It was something deeper, something I couldn't fake or turn off. People responded to me before I even said anything. Their eyes would shift, their energy would change. Sometimes they'd soften around me. Sometimes they'd tense up. But either way, they felt something. I used to think it was coincidence. Maybe I was just overly aware. But deep down, I knew. I could walk into a space and shift the entire mood. I didn't do it intentionally, it just happened. And that's when I began to understand. I wasn't like everyone else. There was something about me that people could sense. Not with words, not with logic, but with something deeper, instinct. Maybe it was in the way I showed up, the way I listened, the way my silence held more presence than most people's words. And the strangest part? They could see it in me before I could. They knew. They felt it, even when I was still doubting myself. They were already reacting to what I hadn't yet embraced. There was no flashing sign, no voice from the sky, just a quiet certainty growing inside me. I was born with something. Not something better, just something deeper. Something that connected me to the unseen, the unspoken, the sacred. I didn't ask for it. I didn't chase it. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. Because every room I entered, every soul I touched, every silence I held, it all pointed to the same truth. I wasn't just here to live. I was here to awaken. For the longest time, I thought it was my fault. I couldn't understand why certain people just didn't like me. There wasn't a reason, at least not one they could explain. I'd walk into a room, and suddenly the air would shift. Smiles would fade, conversations would stop. I hadn't said anything, I hadn't done anything, but something about me seemed to bother them. At first, I took it personally. I questioned myself constantly. Did I say something wrong? Am I being too quiet? Too intense? I'd replay every interaction in my head, searching for the mistake I must have made. It made me shrink. I started trying to be less of myself, toning down my energy, my truth, my presence, just to make people more comfortable. But no matter what I did, that same coldness would show up again. That same look in their eyes. That same tension in the air. And then one day, I stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" And I started asking, "What are they seeing in me that they aren't ready to face in themselves?" That changed everything. Because what I realized is this. People don't always dislike you because of something you've done. Sometimes, they dislike you because your presence shines a light on what they're hiding. Your confidence exposes their insecurity. Your clarity reveals their confusion. Your authenticity unsettles their pretending. I was never the problem. I was just the mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their reflection. That hurt to learn. It still does. Sometimes. Because all I ever wanted was connection. Not conflict. But I've come to understand. Being the mirror isn't easy. But it's necessary. Now, when I feel that unspoken tension, I no longer take it personally. I see it for what it is. Not rejection, but resistance. And that resistance isn't about me. It's about the truth I carry. The one they're not yet ready to hold. I used to wonder why people stared at me. It wasn't the kind of glance you give someone passing by. It was different, longer, heavier, like they were trying to figure something out without even knowing what it was. At first, it made me uncomfortable. I'd catch someone looking at me for too long, and I'd instantly feel exposed. I'd lower my gaze, fix my clothes, check my reflection, wondering if something was out of place. But everything was fine, at least on the outside. Still, the stares kept coming. At the grocery store, in meetings, even at random places where I barely knew anyone. There was always someone whose eyes seemed to follow me. And they weren't always kind. Some looked curious. Others looked confused. A few looked almost irritated. Like my presence itself was too much. It used to make me shrink. I'd try to be less visible, less noticeable, as if blending in would stop the eyes from finding me. But over time, I began to see it differently. Maybe it wasn't about how I looked. Maybe it was about what they felt. Because energy is real. And whether people know it or not, they react to what they sense. And I've learned, some people sense light. Even when they don't have a name for it. They feel something they don't understand. And their first response is to stare. I used to resent it. Now I embrace it. I no longer hide when eyes land on me. I don't lower my head or question my worth. Instead, I remind myself, they're not looking at me because something's wrong. They're looking because something in me reminds them of something they've forgotten. Something powerful, something ancient, something they can't explain, but deep down, they recognize. It started slowly. At first, I didn't even notice. Someone started using the same phrases I did. Another person began dressing a little like me. The way I spoke, the way I moved, even the way I handled certain situations, people around me started to mirror it. And for a while, I was confused. These were people with their own personalities, their own paths, their own identities. So why were they trying to walk like me, talk like me, live like me? At first, I felt flattered. A small part of me thought, maybe I'm doing something right. But then came the discomfort. I wasn't trying to lead. I wasn't asking to be followed. I was just being myself. And yet, my energy seemed to ripple through the spaces I entered, quietly influencing others without effort or intention. It felt strange, like I was watching people slowly lose pieces of themselves just to hold a piece of me. That bothered me, but over time, I stopped seeing it as a threat and started seeing it as a reflection. Because I learned something important. Real energy doesn't need to be advertised. It spreads on its own, like a scent in the wind. Like warmth from a flame. People are drawn to authenticity, especially when they've been living behind masks. When they see someone stand in their truth, unapologetically, it awakens something in them. A longing, a memory, a spark they didn't know they had. So now, when I notice someone mimicking my words or adopting my habits, I don't take offense. I don't feel pride either. I just smile, quietly, inwardly, because I know what's really happening. It's not that they want to become me. It's that they're trying to remember how to be themselves. And somehow, something about me helps them do that. Not because I'm special, but because I'm real. The questions always come out of nowhere. Not the usual small talk. Not the surface level stuff. But deep, unexpected questions that leave me pausing mid-thought. Why did you make that decision? How do you always seem so clear? What made you trust that path? At first, I thought they were just curious. But it kept happening. Different people, different places, same questions, always circling back to how I live, how I choose, how I know what I want. I didn't have fancy answers. I didn't have a formula or a 5-step plan. Honestly, I was just following something inside me. Something quiet, something sure. But the way they looked at me, like I had some secret blueprint they'd never seen, made me wonder. Was I really that different? Or had they just forgotten how to listen to themselves? Their questions made me reflect. Was I living in some strange, unconventional way? Or were they the ones stuck in a pattern that never belonged to them in the first place? I used to feel awkward explaining myself. I didn't want to sound arrogant or distant. But I've come to realize, they're not asking because they're judging. They're asking because they're searching. And something about how I move through the world makes them believe there's another way. A quieter way. A truer way. Now, I welcome the questions. I don't always have answers. But I have stories. I have lived experience. And sometimes, that's enough. Because if my life can spark even a small shift in someone else, if my clarity can remind them that they, too, have inner knowing, then the questions aren't strange at all. They're sacred. And maybe, just maybe, They're not asking about me. They're asking about the part of themselves they're finally ready to meet. There's a certain tension I've come to recognize. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. But I feel it. The shift in the air when someone stands next to me and suddenly doesn't know what to do with themselves. They fidget. They avoid eye contact. Their voice gets shaky. And I can feel their nervous energy like static between us. For a long time, I thought I was the problem. Maybe I was too much. Too quiet. Too intense. Too present. So I started pulling back, shrinking myself. Softening my tone. Dimming my light. Just to make other people feel more at ease. But it only made me feel lonelier. Like I was walking through the world trying to make everyone else comfortable while no one even noticed the weight I was carrying. I remember thinking, why does it feel like people are afraid of me when I've never done anything to harm them? And then one day, it hit me. I wasn't making them afraid. I was activating something inside them. My presence wasn't the threat. Their own self-doubt was. Their own confusion, their own fear of being seen. Because when you carry clarity, it highlights their uncertainty. When you stand in your truth, it reflects the parts of them still hiding. When you're calm, confident, and rooted, people who aren't will feel it like a mirror they didn't ask to look into. That's when I stopped shrinking. I realized that the discomfort they felt around me wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs to face. I still walk through rooms where people shift nervously in their seats. I still see the hesitation in their eyes. But now, I meet it with compassion, not guilt, because I know, I'm not here to soothe their wounds. I'm here to remind them they have the power to heal. People often come to me with decisions they've already made. But somehow, they still need me to say, yes, that's right. At first, I didn't think much of it. We all need reassurance sometimes. A second opinion, a little nudge to help us feel steady. But over time, I noticed a pattern. Friends, coworkers, even strangers, they'd ask what I thought about their relationships, careers, life choices, before they fully trusted their own voice. As if my words carried some kind of weight they didn't believe they had themselves. And that made me uncomfortable. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I never asked to be the final voice in someone else's life. I started to feel like I was sitting in a seat I didn't belong in. The judge's seat, the one where people wait, wide-eyed, for your approval before they take a single step forward. And honestly, that's a heavy place to be. Because I never wanted anyone to follow me. I wanted them to follow themselves. I didn't want them to need my yes to chase what lit them up. I just wanted them to see that their yes was enough. But people feel something in me. A groundedness, a clarity, a presence they trust. So they lean in, hoping that if I believe in them, they can believe in themselves too. And I get it, I really do. But here's what I've learned. The most powerful thing I can do isn't to give answers. It's to reflect the truth they already carry. So now, when someone comes to me looking for validation, I listen with care. I speak with honesty. But I also remind them gently. You don't need me to say it's okay. You just need to know you already know. There's something strange about how people respond to my failures. They don't just notice them. They hold onto them, replay them, talk about them, sometimes louder than they ever celebrated my wins. At first, I didn't understand it. Why would someone who barely knew me take so much interest in the moments I stumbled? Why would people I thought supported me suddenly light up when things didn't go as planned? It stung, because I've always rooted for others, even in silence. And yet, when I needed that same quiet support, what I got was whispers, smirks, and "I told you so" glances. It made me feel exposed, vulnerable, like my mistakes were being put under a microscope while my growth was brushed aside. But with time, I started to see the truth behind it. It wasn't about me. It was about what I represented. When you stand tall in who you are, when you live with purpose, clarity, and authenticity, you become a mirror. And not everyone likes what they see in that reflection. My confidence, my direction, my light, they all remind people of the parts of themselves they've neglected. And when I fall, it gives them a momentary sense of relief. Like maybe I wasn't so different after all. Like maybe they don't have to try so hard. It's not cruelty. It's insecurity, masked as interest. And while I no longer take it personally, I still feel it. That silent celebration of my low moments. That subtle satisfaction in my slip-ups. But here's what I've learned. My failures don't make me less worthy. They make me more human. And if people need my humanity to feel better about their own, then so be it. Because I'll keep rising. I'll keep learning. And I'll keep shining. Even if they're only watching to see me fall. People often come to me when they're lost. Not always with words like, "help," or "guide me." But in their eyes, in their pauses, in the way they sit across from me and slowly begin to unfold. They tell me things they've held in for years. Secrets, doubts, heavy decisions. And then they wait, quietly, expectantly, for something I might say. I never claimed to have the answers. I never set out to become someone's counselor or compass. But somehow, I became the one people turn to when they don't trust their own voice. At first, it felt overwhelming. The responsibility, the weight of their pain, their confusion, their hope. And part of me wanted to pull away, to remind them I'm just a person, figuring things out like everyone else. But another part of me understood. Because I've been that person too. Sitting in silence, wishing someone could just see me, hear me, help me make sense of it all. Still, I had to learn the hard way. I can guide, but I cannot carry. I can reflect truth, but I cannot live it for them. There was a time when I tried to give more than I had. Pouring from a cup I hadn't filled. And it left me empty. Now, I hold space without losing myself. I listen without absorbing. I speak with honesty. But I also remind them. Your path is yours to walk. Your wisdom is already within you. It's an honor to be someone people trust. But I've come to realize, the most powerful advice I can offer isn't direction. It's permission. Permission to feel. Permission to trust. Permission to believe they already know what to do. Because at the end of the day, I'm not here to be anyone's answer. I'm here to help them remember. They've had it all along. Looking back, none of it was random. The stares, the whispers, the questions, the admiration, the resistance, even the silence that wrapped itself around me in rooms full of people. Every moment was a mirror. Every reaction, a reflection of who I was becoming and who others were when standing next to someone who refused to dim their light. For a long time, I thought being different meant being wrong. I carried the weight of other people's discomfort, thinking it was mine to fix. I tried to be softer, quieter, smaller, but the truth kept rising in me, louder, brighter, unshakable. I am not here to fit in. I am not here to be liked by everyone. I am here to be, fully, freely, fiercely. And yes, that has consequences. It makes people stare. It makes some people imitate. And others push away. It invites questions and awakens insecurities. But it also lights fires. It opens hearts. It calls others home to themselves. I now understand. This path was never about proving anything. It was about remembering who I am. And walking in that truth. No matter who's watching. So if you've felt these signs, if you've seen yourself in these stories, then maybe you're not just different. Maybe you're chosen too. And maybe, just maybe, the world has been waiting for you to stop apologizing and start becoming. There came a moment when I stopped asking for permission, stopped explaining my choices, stopped shrinking in rooms that couldn't hold my truth, stopped editing myself just to make others comfortable. And something shifted. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a big announcement or dramatic scene. Just a quiet knowing, a peace that settled deep in my chest like, this is who I've always been. I stopped chasing validation and started choosing alignment. And with that choice, the weight I'd been carrying, people's opinions, their projections, their discomfort, began to fall away. I no longer needed everyone to understand me. I just needed to understand myself. And trust that who I am, without filters, without apology, is exactly who I'm meant to be. I began to speak with clarity, not fear, to walk into rooms without wondering who I had to become to be accepted. To show up fully, light and shadow, strength and softness, and let that be enough. And here's the truth. When you stop dimming your light to protect others from their own shadows, you give them permission to rise too. Not everyone will. Some will leave. Some will stay. But shift away. Some will resent your growth because it reminds them of the parts they're still hiding. But the ones meant for you, the ones walking toward their own truth, will find you. And you'll recognize each other. Not by words, but by the way your presence feels like home to their soul. So no, I don't live for acceptance anymore. I live for alignment, for purpose, for peace. And in that space, where I am no longer seeking, I have finally arrived.